Good afternoon and a warm welcome to our viewing and listening audience. I am Anisha Cruz Walcott of the National Training Agency, and I will be your moderator for this afternoon's session. First of all, I would like to sincerely apologize for the delayed start to today's webinar. I understand that your time is valuable, and I regret any inconvenience or frustration that this delayed start may have caused. So we will proceed. In transitioning from a learning environment to the world of work, there must be a foundation for occupational competence, which the National Occupational Standards fulfills. A key distinguishing factor of these National Occupational Standards is that they reflect current functions and workplace activities in an occupational area, thus identifying the competencies expected for someone in a particular occupational role. With the evolving nature of work and the jobs of the future, national occupational standards are even more relevant considering that they are market driven and relevant to the industry. As part of the National Training Agency's commitment to workforce development, the agency has partnered with the Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago to bring you today's webinar. It therefore gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Antonia Ferrier, HRMATT Treasurer and Board Member, to present on the topic Advancing Workforce Development Through National Occupational Standards. Antonia Ferrier, is a strategy consultant and performance coach. She is a social scientist, business psychologist, balanced scorecard subject matter expert, and certified emotional intelligence consultant. She credits her success in the arenas of organizational transformation, operational effectiveness, and strategic alignment to her foundational experience in HR. Antonia enjoys gaining and sharing new knowledge. She believes that we should all seek to live purposely and give back more than we take. Please join me in warmly welcoming Ms. Ferrier.
Come on. Good afternoon. Oh, I have to share my screen. My apologies. My disappeared.
Am I still on? Okay. Audience, we just lost Ms. Ferrier for a brief moment. We beg your indulgence, patience, as Ms. Ferrier will rejoin shortly. Okay, audience, we have Miss Ferrier back with us, and she is ready to begin her presentation for this afternoon. Thank you again for your patience. Miss Ferrier, over to you.
Thank you, Anisha, and audience. I am so very sorry for my technical glitch there. I promised them in the dry run yesterday that I would not log myself out when I was doing the switch to the share screen, and I did exactly what I promised not to do. So thank you again for your patience. And I'm here today to talk about using occupational standards as a means to improving workforce development. And before we get into the topic, there is one question that we all need to be thinking of. We hear it all the time, but the question is, are we really ready for the future of work in Trinidad and Tobago? And I want to share a story. Last year, HRMATT was invited to participate in an oil and gas conference, and we contributed to workforce matters in terms of local content and the change in technology landscape and innovation. And in doing the research for that, two things stood out for me. One was, although Trinidad had one of the most robust local content, meaning that there was requirements for foreign companies operating in Trinidad to ensure that local persons are incorporated and engaged in the business of the energy sector. There was legislation for everything under the sun, very, very robust: financial, taxation, use of resources, technology, but there was absolutely no legal requirement for knowledge transfer. And then there was this number, this 37%, which is what has created the burning platform for us. I don't know if you reckon, if without context, I'll just tell you this is a CXC pass rate, right? 37%. And why we need to be particularly concerned about that number is that was a decline from 2021, where the pass rate was 41%. And so in 2022, the pass rate for mathematics was just 37%. Why is this so concerning to us? And why is it forming a burning platform? Well, the world is changing. And the Ministry of Planning and Development, in looking at the development of various sectors and where the future of work is going to be, what jobs are going to come, looked at our international report on the future of jobs. Although we weren't part of that study, we are duly informed in it because it was a fairly robust study, but you know, Trinidad, our numbers are small. But they noted that based on their global survey, 8 out of the top 10 positions are increasing in demand across all industries, are IT-based positions. And so they looked at the demand for the next 5 years and noticed that this orange here is going to be high demand. 5 years. We need to be able to fill a plethora of jobs from security, risk, network, digital specialists, analysts, AI. And the things that's going to fall away or that's going to decline, we'll have no immediate, not fall away, sorry, but we have no immediate need for, is the thing we talk most about, renewable energies. The lowest demand. Demand for this is not going to come in until, you know, towards the end of 2025 or so. But the rest of it is all the use of technology. We have a whole explosion of digitalization and the use of artificial intelligence and learning systems that is rapidly changing even what we know as IT. And the study further went on to show that all these jobs that we are familiar with are going to narrow down by 2030 into just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 clusters of jobs. And we need to be concerned, because if we are saying that in just 5 years we're going to have a jump in demand, and in the next 30 years we could imagine a total transition of the workforce from things that we are accustomed to, finance, consulting, all these things are just going to fall away and get focused on IT-focused jobs, because we are moving from the front end of service delivery. People are moving to the back end. Machines are taking over, the interfaces are automated, and the people, they're not going to disappear. They're going to go in the back to run the machines, program the machines, code the machines, create the content and the guidance for the machines to think. But it's going to be, in fewer areas. And so we're going to have now, this is what the clusters of work that we look at. Notice how many of them are indeed IT centered. Okay, so the doing work is going to be automated, and what's going to be left for us is the thinking work. And are we prepared for that? Well, let's look at what's happening in Trinidad. One, we have a big problem in that our workforce itself is growing negatively if we are to impute this from the growth of our production of graduates. And so looking at the 10-year span, and this data is taken from NTA's study, well, this chart here, you'll see this nice declining pattern, which is reinforced by World Bank statistics. And this chart looks at the number of enrollees, which is the dark blue, versus the number of graduates. And here's the thing, we're going to have an 86 between this peak of 2012 to 2020. We had an 86% decline in post-secondary, meaning TVET and tertiary level graduates, versus and NIHERS did a study with UE, and they found that there is a 32% decline in university graduates between 2017 and 2021. And what is the implication of that? Trinidad prides itself as being poised for competitive advantage in one area. Yes, it's our human capital. Competitive advantage, which is what allows us to thrive as an economy, which allows us to thrive and uniquely position ourselves as organizations, which is what generates and guarantees employment and earning capacity, requires access to the natural resources, highly skilled labor, strong brand awareness, technology, and price leadership. All these things, as we just saw from the data, are changing. In Trinidad, we know the energy sector, we are facing a loss of a decline in our energy sector, our energy market. So the rest of it is going to be about what people can do. Can we take our labor force and market ourselves, position ourselves differently, develop new and proprietary technology, and do so in a competitive way? The World Bank, Trinidad, right now, as in 2022, based on 2022 report, that we can count right now on, among other things, our solid human capital, which sounds very wonderful, yes? But when we look at what's happening with our human capital development trajectory, when we were first measured in 2010, it was 0.54 or 56. We rounded up to 0.06. Okay, and human capital, the human capital index, which is a statistic that measures the productivity of our future worker. Looking at a child born today, will they be able to, are we educating and taking care of their health sufficiently so that they can be a viable entrant in the workforce? Back in 2010, we were a little over 0.5, so we were at 0.6 on average. 2020, we are about the same. We've just had a 0.2% increase in our score. But I want you to pay attention if at this the highest performing areas, which is this those scoring at 0.6 or above. Back in 2010, North America and Europe, yes, Australia, were the top countries, and we were sitting pretty well, okay, relative to that. But in the meantime, in the last 10 years, look at what's happened. The human capital index for Russia and Asia has expanded. Everybody has gone ahead of us, and a lot of the technology that we are seeing, that we are adapting, are coming from these countries here with the higher human capital index, which means that they are generating new persons, new graduates, new thinkers, new technologies, all those factors that give competitive advantage at a higher rate than we are. And so the question is, are we going to remain competitive? And I took a look at how we are in terms of innovation, and I looked at the statistic for patent applications in Trinidad. And this is a comparison of patents filed in Trinidad, non-residents versus residents. And notice that non-resident patents are declining, yes, but they are right now, they're down to about 100 a year. Our residents, and by residents, we're going to impute here that they are persons born, bred, educated in Trinidad. The trend is increasing, yes, but comparatively speaking, the number of patents we have generated over the same period averages about 3. Some years we have not generated anything new. And so the question is, how are we going to keep up our competitive advantage if our workforce is not keeping up? The government has identified that this ICT skill, government has no standards for information systems programming and coding. And so they've just taken a broad brush approach to how they're going to develop, and bearing in mind that the government itself is the largest employer in Trinidad. And usually what happens at the government level, the state level, drives change in the country. We really need to be concerned that, you know, this flag that we're seeing here, that there is no standard for this critical sector. And we have to look at what the top 10 skills to 2025 are going to be. All of it is technology centered in the main, but look at the people part of it. It's the thinking, the way we think, the way we learn, the way we solve problems, because as I said earlier, the doing and the task is going towards the machine, but we are going to be keeping the thinking part of the job, the creative parts of the job. So if we look at the shift between the role of people versus machines, you will notice that the changes are aligned to that. The jobs, the tasks that are doing, that can be automated, is moving to the machines, whereas the ones that are about thinking, communicating, are staying with the human part of it. So we really have to look at what is happening with our workforce and how do we catch up our workforce development to make sure that we stay ahead and that we get into that nice dark blue part of the human capital index. And so when we come to workforce development, there are essentially 3 models, 3 perspectives. At the societal perspective is really a very broad approach. We look at the future economic stability and growth of the country or the region. When we look from an organizational perspective, what the focus becomes now, the skills that we need to stay globally competitive. Whereas if we look at it from the individual perspective, it is about training and education. And therefore, we want to look at how well are we making opportunities accessible, and how well are individuals themselves accessing those opportunities to develop the skills and competencies that are needed. Getting workforce development done, of course, is, although we have three perspectives, they don't operate independently. And I like this model that shows that when you put it all together, there are really five areas that we, if it's working well, we're going to see. So we have talent pool coming in from our secondary students, post-secondary, our career readiness. We have to look at where the resources, the funding is going to come from to allow for the development of the workforce. What's the role of the institutions who prepare persons for the career? And we're looking at educational institutions, technical training institutions, certification programs, and the benchmarking and defining of employability skills. Then we have the people who employ career-ready persons in the form of organizations who we could put under the umbrella of talent seekers. So those will be the companies, the various agencies and institutions, the trades, the army. And of course, it all goes back to keep for our continuous sustained development opportunities for persons to get that applied learning, to build the competencies that are needed for employability. And this will be the form of internships, apprenticeships, jobs, and career development events. So I like this framework because immediately we start thinking about what players we have operating here. And I think in Trinidad, we do have all arms of this working, well, populated. But the question is, are we working well? In the organization, we have to be mindful that even though we have all the ambits of resourcing in terms of generation of a workforce, in terms of skilling of people, in terms of defining what competencies we need, a lot of that is generated from what happens inside of the organization. The market does not change by itself. It changes because demand, tastes, preferences change, and some organization decides that it wants to adapt itself to offer what people are demanding to consume. And for an organization to be competitive and to stay in business, it has to recognize that it's only going to be as good as its people. So human resource management, and in particular, strategic human resource management, becomes very, very important, because if we are not managing how we are sourcing and growing our people and managing them through the life cycle of the organization, we're going to have some problems staying sustainable. So HR breaks down, when we look from a workforce development, the retention and recruitment, infrastructure development, research and education, training and development, organization development. And this is where occupational standards now help us to make that match between all the moving arms of workforce development and the connectivity between the organizations that really define what jobs are needed. And HR plays a critical role in helping develop that, along with the people who actually do the job. So we have NTA, our national training agency, who is responsible for the development of occupational standards in alignment with those clusters of people that we would have looked at before. And so they partner with the industry experts, they partner with the education experts, they partner with, just the what they call the lay people to find out what's going on, what's emerging, how are jobs changing, how are work processes changing. And that helps them to develop their occupational standards, the definitions of which they use are the standard and occupational standard in general gives a precise description of what an individual is expected to be able to do in his work or his or her work role. And these are defined in terms of ideal benchmarks against which competence is assessed and certified. And so the occupational standard really gives you your knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required to help you do the job well. And when I say well, I mean with excellence. How well your organization does that is a function of how well it integrates the occupational standards into this model for its workforce development, because the standards allow you at the retention and recruitment phase to properly define what it is you want to source from the market. It allows you to develop your testing and the design of your training and development that keeps the employee growing. We have to put people to work. So knowing what people have to be able to do allows you to design the infrastructure to support that. If a job is technology based, then we know we need to keep up pace with the change in technology. If it's machine based, we need to know that we have people trained to operate those machines safely. Okay? And of course, if we are thinking strategically, we can use those standards to help us look at how we develop the organization in total in terms of the strategic job families and then the key positions that must be developed and changed and kept apace. Because as the technology changes, as the market changes, as the organization's mission and vision for itself changes, jobs are going to change. And one of the things we found in Trinidad is that a lot of the times we define jobs, we hire people pre-trained, and we expect them somehow to magically keep pace. And with changing economic fortunes, we are now expecting the employees to pay for their own training and development. We are less generous in many instances, and some people are just more judicious. If they know they are downsizing a particular arm of its business, they stop investing in the people development in those areas and focus on other areas. And these things have an effect on employee morale and employee engagement, because if you are not investing in me from an individual development perspective, why should I give you the benefit of my time and energy to develop your business? So it really requires us to employ that clear definition of what it is we want from our job, what we want people to be able to do in how we design the organization, how we design the jobs, how we train and grow the people and maintain them in the system. At the national level, occupational standards now allow us to define those jobs from a more global perspective. So it's not just what your company wants, but generally what the industry or that subsector of an industry looks for. And so in the course of doing their framing, occupational standards start first with having an occupational map. Where does this come from? This is an example of the sub-service sector for the energy services sector, which is a critical part of Trinidad. And this is the area that is earmarked as the growth area, as our natural resource. That part of the competitive advantage dwindles. The one that we want to accelerate is the people part of it, our talent the thing that gives us our unique value, which is our experience in running energy sector companies and servicing them. And so this map was developed with the support of the Energy Chamber and its members who sat down. And this process takes just a couple of weeks, up to a month, if people are willing to invest their time. Challenge that we have with this is that it does require the necessary experts and a cross mix of them to volunteer their time, because these resources are made available for free. And if we are serious about workforce development, it means that we have to be committed to helping with this, to making sure that our industry, our subsector, has its own occupational map, so that we start looking first at what are the jobs that we are doing now, and then start looking at the future needs of jobs. Because one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, even as our workforce is dwindling, as you would have seen from the earlier slide, our incoming workforce is dwindling, we do have an opportunity of the existing workforce who are in fact very much on par with the rest of the world. We operate at global standards. To what extent can we reskill and upskill those persons to transition into new areas? Okay, because it's not like they're going to disappear. They're going to still be in the workforce by and large for another 10, 20 years. We have to figure out what we're going to do with the dwindling resources. One of the things we always say in HR is just new work, new requirements does not necessarily mean more people if you optimize use of technology. And so we have to factor in to what extent can we get that mix of technology and people who know how to use the technology to make sure that Trinidad maintains its competitive advantage in terms of the knowledge and skill of its workers. Once we have the occupational maps, we can then do a deep dive and do detailed career mapping, which gives us, and this is, I just point out here that this is using the original classification, which was 5-level. NTA has recently gotten approval to roll out its new classification, which goes up to 10 levels and allow with it to integrate across the Caribbean. And I will leave that for them, Anisha and friends, to roll that part out. But this is just to illustrate how we move from that definition of what jobs the industry wants to starting to define now, okay, where do those jobs rank in terms of the types of positions, how do they articulate on the field? And so this is an example of the process of the process plant operations. That's the pull out here. So we can see that we can easily move now, when we talk about career paths, that this is the range of jobs that somebody who wants to stay in this job family can come in as an operations trainee, a process operator, become a supervisor, superintendent, and move up to a managerial position. And the question is, how is that done? Career pattern becomes so important in the conversation around workforce development, because it means we now have to start making choices as individuals, as organizations, as a country, as to where we're going to invest our time and money in terms of our educational programs, our training and skills development programs, and the availability of that to all. How easily can we make that? So you can see that somebody can start off with just their O-levels, their CXC, or they may be able to go to a technician, get a technical diploma, come in with no experience, and through an apprenticeship program or some entry-level program where you get on-the-job training, you develop as a skilled or semi-skilled worker, a skilled craftsman, and you will notice as we go up, the qualifications start to change. And so it is clear for somebody who wants to progress in here, or an organization who wants to support the employee to progress along the stream of this particular career path, at what point or how far can you go in terms of probability. So if I never get any other qualification than what I had when I entered, in this example, you can only reach as far as a supervisor. However, if I go on to now become trained and an advanced technical diploma, if I become skilled in with a degree in management or engineering, I now position myself to go into the top tier of this profession. And so the decision comes down, what is the role of the individual versus the employee in preparing themselves? We have to disabuse ourselves of the mindset that the full responsibility is that of the organization. The individual has to become self-seeking to look to go and get their training, even if the company is not investing in their development, if this is the career path that you want. But having models like this allows for you as an individual, if you want to switch careers, to look to see, and this is not the full standard here, I just pulled out the qualification part of it, but what the standards allow is for you to look at the skills, and so you can look to see if I want to transition from one career to the next because I'm in a field that's going to disappear in the next 5 to 10 years. How much of my skills are portable, and what do I need to start learning? Where do I need to go reskill? Where do I need to go back, if I need to go back to school, or it's simply for me to find some open source training that will allow me to get the knowledge that I need to do the job. Another good use for using the standards is for competitiveness, is you can look at, if we have a standard that says this is the qualification, I can tell if the job I'm advertising is comparable to what other people are advertising because I'm comparing around as an agreed benchmark. And so I pulled this example. These are two current job advertisements. This one is in Trinidad, this one is in the US. And you will notice that the qualifications in the US pretty much match the standard that, that was agreed by the industry. Whereas this organization, what they're asking for is below the standard for a manager, is actually for that of a superintendent. And so when we start using these in a meaningful way, we start looking at our ability to attract the right type of staff at the right level. And it gives us some insight as to why it is we may be getting the best of the market or the scraps of the market. Okay. The challenge is that not every sector has these standards developed, and more effort is needed to really do this across the board. So I just want to plug again that I'm going to switch to my magnifier here, that the jobs that are increasing, they are either programming the machine, managing the data, or analyzing the data. These are the jobs that are going to grow. This is where the growth is going to happen in by 2025 to 2030. Whereas these common jobs here, look at how many. These are standard jobs that we are doing now that are flagged for disappearing. Why? Because they can all be automated. And with the advent and concretization of artificial intelligence, a lot of these routine, repetitive tasks can be programmed. You don't need a person to do it anymore. You just need a workflow. So as workflow changes, processes changes, our standards are going to change. And so that leaves us what a huge opportunity to make sure that irrespective of the size of our workforce, if we can find a way to accelerate our workforce development from a position of standardized and agreed descriptions of what it is we want, when it is we need it by. I think Trinidad will be in a good place to maintain its competitive advantage, which is its very strong human capital. And so these are, to me, in summary, the opportunities for us to accelerate. At the national level, we need to become, we need collective collaborative effort. If you recall the model, you will see how many sectors, how many actors play a part in workforce development. Not all of it is government, but certainly the government can start the standardization of its platforms, putting in legislation. There's a current discussion now about making standards a national requirement, mandatory, so that you must design your jobs and your educational curriculum around those requirements. But it requires continuous assessment of what is happening in the market. And this is something that more effort is needed. We do have a lot of innovators. We do have a lot of international partners. And so this is not something we need to start from scratch. We just need to use what's already there, use the people who want to see these jobs, these ICT-based jobs in Trinidad, to really make sure that there's a home for them here and they don't have to look to export their talents. Even if they stay in Trinidad now with digitization, they can stay from home and work remotely in foreign. Let's keep our intellectual capital in Trinidad, and let's try and collaborate. And on that note, one of the issues critical to what we are seeing happening with the workforce at the graduation rates is that there has been a dilution of effort. We had before different areas of support. We had the apprenticeship programs for persons who, what we had school leavers who didn't pass common entrance, who didn't pass secondary school. You could have gone in and learned the skills on the job. Now, with the advent of digital technology, you may need, there are certain skills that you, educational requirements that you must have. Yes, maths and English being core building blocks to being able to function in today's world. And we have a high literacy rate in Trinidad, but if we look at that skills fallout coming into the workforce, and this is going to be our future workforce, hitting in immediately to now, it's declining. Maths teaches you not just how to add, but also how to think and problem solve. We need to bring our agencies together so that we have development on all areas. At the organization level, we need strategic human capital assessments. Organizations have to look at where they want to go in the market and upskill and reskill based on what their readiness assessment says. And of course, they need to not leave everything up to the government. They need to invest in their own apprenticeship and training programs, take advantage of the new funding that's available for starting these programs, and make room for the individuals who are self-seeking, who are learning to learn, for the training agencies and educational agencies to do what we used to call long ago block release. You get the technical training and then you get the applied learning in the workplace. We need to have more of those programs done. And so really, I would say this effort is needed right here. We need to redirect our energy and our funding to fixing the overall platform for workforce development. And then everybody contributes, either the organization or the individual, so that we can have accelerated growth and correction and keep pace with the rest of the world. And that brings me to the end. So Anissa, how did I do? Did I keep time? I'm not hearing you, unfortunately.
My apologies. Thank you very much, Ms. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
And as
And
we look
as we
towards
look
the
to
space of the future and the human resource skills and competencies needed, there is a need to balance the technical know-how of persons needs to demonstrate with the soft skills.
Yes.
Um, now, we now proceed to a question and answer segment where you, the audience, can participate. We will attempt to address as many questions as the remaining time will allow. Well, we are past our time, but we still will accommodate a couple questions that came in. For you, Ms. Ferrier, one of our first questions is from Mrs. Lisa Macano Subero, who asks, what is being done to upskill our citizens' digital competence?
Right now, that study that I referenced from the Ministry of Planning, they have actually started the process of working with the UN and its agencies to do a full assessment. So what we see is their strategic assessment of what's happening in the market to look at the demand, and work is ongoing at this moment to concretize that in terms of actual numbers and look at what needs to happen in terms of the educational programs and in terms of the how organizations are contributing in to develop the apprenticeship and training programs. Okay, because the reality is the funding is not properly directed to support it. But before you throw the money at it, you need to know where you're throwing it, because we would have had the experience where we tried a thing the last, 10 years ago, where we integrated our technical institutes with UTT, which was the associates. And what we've had is a dilution now of the technical training and the craftsman training, because where the money was going was pulling them towards the tertiary level type programs, and we had a fall off in that development of the journeyman program. And the ones that remain, the YTEP, MIC, etc., are often seen as social programs and not easily accredited. So we don't want to make that mistake with the ICT. A lot of training is available as open source training. And so once the government defines where we really need to grow the skills, which jobs we are easily accessible and we have the most portability or transferability of our existing IT knowledge and skills, I think we can direct our energy. My recommendation, and I wrote an article about it, if you read HRMATT Speaks, is to take some of the funding that we would have thrown towards the development of university programs and invest in the infrastructure to support ICT self-learning. Yes, make web the internet free, have learning centers, upgrade the machines that people have to work on in the schools. Those things are not being done. And if we just keep funding the degrees, a degree takes anywhere between 4 to 6 years to develop a person. Whereas the open source learning, what we have to do is just create immediate access and people will learn.
Most definitely. You touched on a very important point there, which I was about to raise as well, which was the access to technology and connectivity, because you still have a lot of persons out there who cannot even afford the technology devices, or who don't have high-speed internet connectivity and digital resources. So we actually need to bridge that digital divide by providing support and resources to those undeserved communities and those disadvantaged individuals as well. So you did touch on that as well. Okay, we do have another question for you, Ms. Ferrier, from Jermaine Gray. What is being done to promote change or enhancement of the curricula in secondary schools to accommodate the demands of the workforce?
Well, the Ministry of Education is very, very concerned that we are generating a cohort or two and more to come of persons who are not employable in the future workforce.
Okay.
Some of them are not even employable in the current workforce. And so there is an active work and partnering with agencies like HRMATT and other NGOs to bring the minds and hearts together to work with the students. And one of the critical things, as you noticed, apart from the use of technology, is the soft skills.
Yes.
A key part of the employability is your ability to communicate, work in teams. And we know we have a serious issue happening in our schools now around aggression, disinterest in learning, and unwillingness to collaborate. And really for the workforce to be active and vibrant and contributing, you need people with those communication skills, problem solving skills,
Absolutely.
so there is a strong push now by the Ministry of Education, apart from revisiting the hard skills, to bring those social emotional learning and improve how we communicate and put more support, because we are socialized different now. Our children are being socialized very, very differently, and it makes them very individuated in their thinking as opposed to community based, how people, old people like me would have been grown up.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Ferrier. So as we approach, well, it's now 2:41 p.m.
Yes.
Well, we have to wrap up. We have come to the end of this webinar.
Yes.
Firstly, we wish to express our deepest appreciation to Ms. Ferrier for her time and very engaging presentation. We also wish to recognize and thank HRMATT's President and Board of Directors for supporting this webinar as part of an ongoing and exciting workforce development partnership with the National Training Agency. And with COVID-19 no longer being a public health emergency, there's an urgent and immediate need for the labor force to adapt to the ever-changing realities. Of course, we must pay particular attention to the rapid advancement with AI, which Ms. Ferrier would have spoken about, and how we are going to um, work together actually with, well, how we are going to marry the technology with the hard skills, because I'm sure there's a concerns for person with their jobs, the future of their jobs and the role that they would play. So there, of course, is a need for continuous learning and adaptation. She touched on the importance of soft skills and, the shifting skill requirements. And of course, well, which I didn't hear about, but we also have to consider those ethical considerations.
Yes.
And the new opportunities as well.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So thank you to all of those viewing and listening live. Please be reminded that you can view this discussion and our previous webinars on the NTA's YouTube channel. And we encourage you to subscribe to our channel and share these webinars. If you wish to send us feedback or suggestions for other webinars, send us an email at webinar@ntatt.org. You may also visit our website, www.ntatt.org, for a list of available National Occupational Standards. I am Anisha Walcott, reminding you to look out for further communications from our team, including the link from this session's webinar, and wishing you a great afternoon. Thank you again for your patience. Thank you, Ms. Ferrier, and goodbye all.
Thank you for having us.